Okay, so I'm doing Freshwater Scarcity and Sufficient Food Production oral presentation by Kyle Foster. So, why did I choose this topic? Well, first off, it's just a project that is really near and dear to my heart. Um, I'm a farmer here in Lubbock. I raise cattle, chickens, and goats, and we also have a Bermuda sod farm. And our sod farm has one of these that you see in this picture. This is a water pivot, and it circles around. It may take 48 hours to get all the way around the field spraying water. And, I never really thought anything about that. I just thought, I'm feeding my crops. That's what we all have to do. We got to feed our crops to get by, and it's a necessity. But a little while ago, I learned about, the water scarcity throughout the world, and there is some here in West Texas, but really, I'm just more concerned about people who don't have access to fresh water. And I was wondering why. And I learned that agriculture takes up 70% of freshwater resources around the world. And that is a lot of fresh water that could be helping people. But at the same time, it's easy to put the blame on agriculture. But at the same time, you think, oh, well, they need it. We need water. We need this to grow our crops. And so I thought, yes, we do. But there has to be a way to decrease the amount of water that we actually use. Does 70% need to be the number? And that's really when I saw this project available, I really wanted to look more into it and kind of stick up for the farmers. Stick up for the ones that are trying to grow our crops and grow the food on our table. But also find a way that we can be an ally in all of this and not necessarily the enemy, but instead of someone you point to and say, "Oh yeah, that's the reason. That's the reason we only have 30% of water is because of these farmers." And so I really wanted to figure out a way that could help. So, what disciplines do we need to use to fix this problem? Well, for this project, I chose natural resource management, which is all about how to manage the field, how to be a better steward of the land, as we like to say on my farm, and education, learning about this. Technology is all about equipment to be used, different techniques that could better help. There's definitely some computer analysis stuff that is making large advancements in agriculture. And then finally, economics and business was about is is what we're doing, will it help while still being profitable, while still being able to keep our crop yields up? While this is a very admirable thing to do to have less water, if it hurts the farmer instead of helping, uh, then it's all for nothing because if a farmer can't pay his bills, well, no more farmer, no more food. And so you really need to look at, is this worth it? Can they still make a profit while using less water? Will their crops still grow? And throughout this project, I believe that they can. So, natural resource management. Why did I choose this discipline? Well, this discipline is all about ways that the farmer can be a better steward of his or her land and ways that they could utilize the water around them. When you look at this, I have Virtual Water from an article by Mankazu, Walter, and a number of other authors. And it talks about surface and groundwater that can minimize the use of water on crops. And really, what this just means is that you finding a way to harness the recycled water that comes from the rain, the rain, the skies, the runoff from the ground, any recycled water that doesn't have to come from the well house. Reduction in management just goes along with what I'm saying of wasting water. There's a lot of times I'll be driving down the road and I'll see farmers that their pivot, I can tell, is spewing out way more water than necessary. And so reduction management falls along with the lines of what we have learned since we were kids: reduce, reuse, recycle, right? And long maturing crop varieties, I could have put this in technology because this has to do with genetic engineering. But the reason I put it in natural resource management is because of this early plant date. These crops are going to take longer to mature, but with genetic engineering, they take way less water, and so the early planting date also relies on the fact that you plant during a rainy season. It will soak up that water like a cactus and hold it throughout its lifespan. And so, yes, it takes longer to grow, but if you plant it earlier, you use a lot less water. Economics and business, you will save more money, and so hopefully in there it'll all even out, and it'll be better for the environment as a whole. So, technology, the discipline of technology. This is all about what advancements we have made to help our farmers. And just to start off, e-agriculture is something that's very interesting, and it has to do with obviously electronic agriculture. And right here I have remote sensing. What this is just a computer sensor that tells, like say, your water pivot. The water pivot was the picture and slide two, but it tells your water pivot when to move, when to stop, how much water to spray out, how many gallons per second, per minute, per hour, however you want. That's a high level technology, and that also comes from just years and years ago. Um, the biggest advancement in this technology was probably on the water pivots, was probably the use of smaller sprinkler heads closer to the pivot. And that seems like a simple, very simple thing, but just think about it. If the end of the pivot moves around faster than the center, it's going to need to spray more water, and then the center is going to need to spray less. But it used to always be that way. It used to be the same amount of water throughout, same amount of sprinkler heads throughout the whole pivot, and it would flood the center. And you used to drive by farms, and you would see the center of the pivot just flooded in water, and the rest was all good. And that's just oversaturation. That comes from under and over irrigated stress. And so nowadays, you have smaller sprinkler heads the closer you get to the center. And so it just makes that all even. It makes your water even. It makes you use less. It's a very high advancement. When I say under and over irrigated stress, obviously if you don't give your crops enough water, they're going to die. But if you give them too much, they'll die too. They'll drown. That's too much irrigation. That's too much stress to put on them. They need to breathe. They need oxygen. Vertical farming is something that is very interesting to me, something I've never tried, but I'm definitely going to on the farm. Layered on top of another in an indoor environment. That's like a greenhouse or anything indoor, right? And it uses a trickle effect. You water one plant, and the minerals get soaked in that water, and they trickle down to the next and the next and the next. It's said to use 95% less water. And one interesting thing from my paper is that the trickle effect, it keeps adding minerals from the dirt and oxidation. At the end of your plant, the last plant that gets that water, is said it's getting super water. It's getting this all these minerals, and it actually, studies show it tends to grow better than the rest. And it's really, really interesting, and something that I think more farmers should really look into if they have a smaller production and a greenhouse production. So, economics and business, the last discipline I chose. As I said earlier, and as I say here, it's all pointless if not profitable. That's the true statement. If you look at a company like Texas Instruments, they use a lot of silicone products, and they need to clean them with water. And it's about overuse. If they use too much water to clean um, their product, they could lose billions, exactly 1.1 billion per year. That's why it's so important to not overuse, to not waste water. When you waste water, that goes along the lines of we're using 70% of the world's fresh water source. That goes along the lines of we're not being productive. Cover crops. Cover crops is something I truly believe in. It's something that we do on our farm. A cover crop just means it's not a plant that you're going to sell. A lot of times we use a cover crop to feed our cattle, but it's just a mixture of all these different types of grasses. And what it does is you plant it. After you're done with your harvest, you plant a cover crop, and the roots go down and it holds your soil in. It keeps your soil nice and healthy and strong, so that when rain does come, it doesn't wash it away. And not only does it not wash your soil away and turn into mudslides, it also holds that water. And so the healthier soil you're going to have, the more you're going to hold water, the less water you're going to use. That is farming to a T. And so you need a cover crop to help you hold this water, and it's going to be a lot less expensive in the long run if you don't keep having to use your pivot. If you have a cover crop that has your soil healthy, you don't need to use your pivot as much. That's just basic math. You're going to make more money. So, how is this interdisciplinary? Well, it's all the disciplines that work together for a common solution. And what that means is that I can't just use natural resource management or technology or economics and business to solve this problem. I need all three. And as well, I also need the people working in those fields. And now, the way they see it, yes, they're only working in one discipline. But when you put them together, it's like gears in a clock that work together. Everything is mixing, everything is grinding, everyone is working towards a solution. So people in different fields and different backgrounds that are working for this one common goal of using less water. So my findings and my conclusion. Farmers are really taking a step in the right direction. They use underground irrigation lines, drip line systems, pressure sensors. We talked about longer maturing crops planted earlier. We talked about e-agriculture. And the most important thing was it's important to hold as much natural water as possible so that you don't use the water from the well. That's where all the fresh water source comes from, is from that well water that we're using. That's where the 70% comes from. And so I think that if you look at where we used to be just 50 years ago to where we are now, it's a gigantic leap forward, and it really has me excited for where we will be 50 years from now, where we will be in the future, where will our advancements take us. And so I think we're definitely headed in the right direction. I think we can definitely solve this problem.